Hello and welcome back to Principles of Macroeconomics. I'm still your host, Dr. B. This is the final chapter of our course here in the fall 2022 semester. Before I start, I want to say it's been an honor and a pleasure to work with all of you. So let's go ahead and talk about macroeconomic policy and what a bunch of economists have to say around the macroeconomic policy. In economics, you'll notice that there's a lot of different philosophers, and they have conflicting views on how to deal with the economy. Some will say, "Oh, we should raise the interest rates to combat inflation." Others will say, "Oh, we should, just let it run its course. Don't interfere." Right? There's so many different philosophies out there. And really, there's six primary debates that have been happening within macroeconomics for quite some time now that we need to think about. We think about policymakers and what they do to try to stabilize the economy. Should they not do it? We talk about fiscal policy used to fight recessions with tax cuts and spending hikes. Should they do things like that? I don't know. Monetary policy and how it's used. How does the Federal Reserve try to reduce inflation? Does the government balance its budget? Oh, that's a current topic, isn't it? Right now, the government's talking about the budget as we speak. Lawmakers on Capitol Hill are discussing the government's budget for 2023. And should tax laws be reformed to encourage people to save more? I think yes. But those are the six arguments that economists are having right now. Six discussions, whatever. Okay, let's look at this first one. Government interference is what I call this. Should government interfere to stabilize the economy? Oh man, that's a tough one. If you leave an economy to do its own thing, it'll fluctuate. Of course it will. It goes up and down. Aggregate demand goes down. It causes a recession. Aggregate demand goes up. Times are good. Real simple. Policymakers try to interject monetary and fiscal policy to stabilize the aggregate demand in an effort to stabilize output and employment rates. This helps the economy to be stable for everyone, to provide economic benefit to everyone. Yay! So the question is it good for government to interfere in the natural economy? I don't know. Sometimes I think it's good, sure. Sometimes I also think they try to do too much, which is not so good. So the arguments against government interference using monetary and fiscal policy. They do too much, okay, which sometimes leaves long-term or short-term shocks that cause fluctuations. That makes it difficult to forecast. Sometimes it takes too long for the policies to take effect, which actually make the fluctuations in the economy worse. So we have arguments for government interference and against it. The fourth part is to protect the economy from bottoming out and make sure we protect employment rates, etc. Those are good things. On the other side of the table, we have people saying, you know what? The problem is their monetary and fiscal policies take too long. It actually makes fluctuations worse. Personally, I don't know. I think you can argue for and against. What about protecting against a recession, which we're about to enter in 2023? Well, typically what the government does in order to combat a recession is that they spend more money, or they'll give people tax cuts. Great Britain tried to do that recently with tax cuts to combat the coming recession. It backfired majorly. It actually makes inflation worse. So the problem is the inflation part, at least in 2022, 2023. If the government spends more or they reduce taxes, it makes inflation worse. Okay? So it's difficult. So what the government tries to do is they'll spend some more money to increase demand, or they'll do tax cuts to increase demand to combat a recession. The other thing they might try to do is keep a balanced budget. The individual states do a pretty good job overall keeping a balanced budget. Mostly keeping a balanced budget. The states do, sure. The federal government does not. They do a terrible job of that. They can't balance a budget to save their lives. The states can. People rely more on the states than they do the federal government, but it's important to understand that part. If we can fight a recession with tax cuts, sure. It provides households with additional spending power. It increases demand through tax credits. The tax cuts will increase the aggregate supply. Definitely. Mostly good things. But then spending might become wasteful, and that doesn't help in the long run, does it? The Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve uses monetary policy based on their discretion. They're an independent body of government, the Federal Reserve is. Sure, the chairperson gets appointed by the president, but other than that, they operate on their own independence, which is a good thing here in the United States. Very good thing. But it's important to understand how the Federal Reserve operates. At times of inflation, they increase the interest rates and in order to decrease monetary growth. When there's times of low inflation, they do the opposite. They constantly have their hand on the dial, increasing the interest rate or decreasing it in order to stabilize inflation. However, sometimes they do more harm than good. If they increase the interest rates too high, it can stagnate, it can discourage growth. So that's a bad thing. Okay. Sometimes they might accidentally cause higher inflation, or they might cause a deep recession. If they raise the interest rates too high, it could cause a deep recession. We expect it to cause a recession with the higher interest rates, but we don't want it to be too bad. So that's why in 2022 you see the Federal Reserve increasing the interest rates a little bit at a time. 0.75%, 0.75%, 0.75%, a little bit 4 times over the course of the year. They're not trying to go too fast, because if they go too fast, they're afraid that it'll cause a deep recession. Some would argue, well, maybe that's what we need. Just a short-term situation in order to combat a long-term problem. Maybe, I don't know. But these are the things that happens with the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is very flexible to react to unforeseen events like the pandemic. They're separate from political influence, but sometimes it's hard to understand what it is that they're thinking, right, because they're independent. The Federal Reserve tries to aim for close to zero inflation. They say that a good rate of inflation is about 2%. Okay, that's a healthy rate of inflation is 2%. The reason why the Federal Reserve likes the inflation rates to be low is to promote steady growth. Makes sense, right? So low inflation rates oftentimes lead to steady growth. That's the idea. If it were zero, we'd see higher unemployment, but we'd see permanent benefits. Costs would be reduced over time because of the zero inflation, but it's not really realistic, you know. Why don't we want a zero inflation rate? Because low inflation rates might discourage workers from working, leading to higher unemployment rates. We want some inflation, but not a lot, okay, to promote steady growth. This one's my favorite slide. Balanced budget. The states do a pretty good job of balancing the budgets. DC, Maryland, Virginia, they all do wonderful jobs balancing the budgets. They know how to balance a budget at the state level. They do a real good job of that. That's where they have enough tax revenue coming in to cover all of their operating expenses, and their planned growth rate. Okay, that's what whole idea behind a balanced budget is. We got enough tax revenue coming in to cover all of the expenses for the state government. Yeah, that's awesome. That's what you want. You want it to be steady, and you want the future generations to be well off. The federal government, they are terrible at budgeting uh, a year's worth of revenue and expenses. The federal government just cannot get it right. They cannot figure out a way to manage their debt effectively to reduce the deficits. You don't want deficits. Deficits are bad. Okay, a deficit happens when the government spends more money than they're taking in from the tax revenue. Okay, you got less tax money coming in, and you're spending more. That creates what's called a deficit. The federal government uses deficit spending. They keep printing more money, going into further debt to perpetuate growth in the infrastructure and the government, all of these things. So why do we want a balanced budget? To have lower debt, to protect future generations. Okay. Because deficits are bad. They crowd out investment. They reduce growth for future living standards. And the deficits can cause recessions or even war. So it's really, really important to have a balanced budget. Although our federal government has a very terrible time doing that. Why might it be a good thing to not have a balanced budget? Well, the government can keep printing money. Okay. It's funny because the federal government expresses its debt expressed as a percentage of a person's lifetime income. I want you all to understand something. I'm going to say something that might be shocking. Here in the United States, we have, I think, 360 million residents. Okay? 360 million citizens of the United States. That's a lot. We're a very large country, yes. We have about $18 trillion of debt. I want you to think about what that is per person in the United States. Each person in this country would have to pay about $60,000 in order to pay the government's debt. Just let that sink in for a second. Now you see why it's important to have a balanced budget. Maybe someday our government will be able to figure that out. I doubt it. Cutting the deficit could do more harm than good because it might cut into education, it might cut into future living standards. If we raise taxes, it might reduce incentives to work and save. It would divert the attention from other programs, and the debt to income ratio become more relevant than the debt itself. Those are arguments against having a balanced budget. I will always argue for having a balanced budget. Taxes. Taxes and savings. The tax code in the United States is the most difficult to understand out of any country on the planet. The United States tax code is extremely difficult to understand. That's why it takes so long to file your taxes every year. That's why it's so complex. You have no idea whether you owe them money or they owe you money until you go through a very long process. Usually, people hire someone else to do it for them because it's so darn complex. There are many arguments for tax reform in the United States. One of those is to encourage additional savings. A higher savings rate provides more funds and capital accumulation, which increases the productivity and living standards. It's real simple. If you have more money in your savings account, the more security you have in the future, right? You have money in your savings account, you feel pretty confident about paying next month's bills. Why don't you think about that? Current U.S. tax system is very discouraging. It's very difficult. We have high marginal tax rates that ultimately reduce savings. Savings can be taxed. Yeah, I know. Isn't that terrible? Your personal income is taxed. Your corporations are taxed. It's double taxation, right? You get taxed on taxes. There's very high tax rates in the United States. They used to be 40 up to 40%. They're still high. Right now they're at about 33% after the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2018. Right now the corporate tax rate, which I believe is around 22%, is still among the highest in the world. but it's not as high as some countries. It would be better to replace income tax with a consumption tax in order to increase the incentive to save. I agree with that statement, but I don't think Congress would. So why do people not want to change the tax system? Tax reform would mainly benefit the wealthy who need tax relief the least. I could argue for or against that. Estimates of the interest rate elasticity of savings are low, so tax incentives may not increase savings that much. I disagree with that. Reducing taxes on capital income may increase the government's budget deficit, negating the benefit of the higher private savings rate. Maybe. It's better to increase the national savings directly by reducing the budget deficit. Yes. Yeah, so taxation affects savings. That's what the takeaway there is. What does economics teach us? Why did you go through this course with me? You went through it because you want to understand how transactions that you have in your daily lives affect the entire economy. After taking this course, now you have a different perception, a different understanding on how the economy works on a national scale. Just a lot of questions maybe you might have that didn't get answered through this course. And if that's true for you, I want you to really think about those questions. And because economics is not just a philosophy course. Economics is a business course that you'll use when in your management, in your own business, in your household, in your daily lives. You will use economics. You do use economics. Now you know more about how you use it. Economics helps you to be more informed, helps you to better understand government policies, and also helps you to make better life decisions. So, yeah, those were the 6 concepts or arguments of debates of economics. Summary. Okay, my friends, this has been an honor, a pleasure, and really, it's been great. It's been a really good 15 weeks with all of you. I've really enjoyed our time together. I hope that you got some good knowledge about macroeconomics, how the country works from an economic perspective, and hopefully you can apply this stuff someday. And that's the whole idea. That's why you're here, is to apply what you learn to your life. It's been a pleasure teaching you, to work with you, to provide you some insight, to make you laugh a little bit, and to make things relatable. You know, because in my opinion, the more that you can relate with what you're learning, the more you'll remember what you learn. Right? That's my 2 cents on the matter. Are there any comments, questions, or concerns about these 6 debates that we just talked about before we talk about a few other things? You good? Okay, in the classroom, as a reminder, what do we have? This is the last lecture. This is the last day. This is the last chapter. Okay, it's week 15. This is it. We're done. What does it mean for you? If you have any late work, you need to get that done. Okay, you got to please get it done. It has to be done by Sunday night. It has to be done by Sunday night. Yeah. Please complete the chapter 22 homework and 23 homework by Sunday night, along with anything that is past due. This is it. This is the last week of the course. Okay? Everything is due this Sunday night, which is December 4th, because the end of the semester is coming. And we cannot go past that date. Yeah. So please make sure that you get everything submitted. Next week, you have the final exam. Let's talk about the final exam briefly before I let you go. The final exam, I want to get into the student view. The final exam is one attempt. It's worth 20 points. Okay, that's a big deal. That's 20% of your grade. Yeah, it's a lot. The final exam is a mix of true, false, and multiple choice questions. Okay. The final exam covers the chapters from the midterm all the way to chapter 24. I promise you it's pretty straightforward. A lot of these are definitions. If you simply look at the questions, many of them are definition based, a lot of which we have talked about over the past 7 weeks. So I want you to look at these questions, jot down some notes, think about where they are in the chapters. Use the PowerPoint slides, your notes, and anything else you might find useful to help you to answer these questions. You can open the exam whenever you're ready. You can start answering questions. You can save and close, which will allow you to come back to it later. Once you click submit, that's it. It's done. It gets submitted. Okay. So don't click submit until you've answered all 20 questions and you know that they're correct. Okay. So take your time with it. Start it early. Go one question at a time. Think about everything. Okay. They're all mixed up. Okay. It doesn't go in order. How do I know that? Question 2 just came from the chapter we just talked about. Phillips curve. Okay. So they don't go in order. That's why it's important that I want you to read each question carefully. Think about where it is in the textbook. Look at your PowerPoint slides and carefully answer each question slowly. Okay, slowly. I promise you, if you do those things, you'll probably do very well. You know what I mean? Any questions on the final exam? We're good? You sure? Hey, it's awful quiet out there. Any last comments, questions, concerns about anything about this course? Anything at all? You sure? Okay. With that, again, I want to say thank you all very, very much for a wonderful semester. It has been an absolute honor and a pleasure to work with all of you throughout the past 15 weeks. This is our last course. This is our last few minutes together. Please, the university will be sending you a survey about this course. Please complete that survey. That helps me as a professor. So, be honest. Tell them what you think about me. That helps me out also. Helps me be better in the future. And if you're late with any work, make sure that all of your late work gets submitted by this Sunday night, along with the 2 chapters for this week. That has to be done, please. Don't be late. I can't take anything past this Sunday night, except for the final. Of course, that'll be the following week. But I need everything else done by Sunday night, please. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you can email me, call me, set up office hours. This is the final week for the course, yeah. So please, if you need anything, I'm here for you. And again, think of me not as just your professor, but also a mentor. I want you to reach out to me even after this course. If you're ever looking for a job in accounting, finance, economics, whatever, reach out to me. I'll help you out. And with that, I want you to stay safe, wash your hands, do the right things. I wish you all the absolute best with the rest of your degree. I want to see you at graduation soon, huh? If you're going to graduate in the ceremony in May, hopefully I'll see you there. Okay? Stop and say hi. I'll be there. All right. Thank you all so much. Appreciate all of you. Wish you all the best. Thank you so much. Take care. Have a great night. Bye-bye.
All right, be safe, Professor.
Thank you. You too. Thank you, Ethan. Thank you. Thank you. Happy holidays. Take care, y'all. Absolute. My pleasure. Take care. Bye-bye.